So, 'tis the season for politicking here in America, and in light of that, I thought I might read something apropos of the fact, that being Robert Penn Warren's All the King's Men. So, as is written here on the cover of this edition of All the King's Men, this book has been called the definitive novel about American politics. Now, Robert Penn Warren was a Southern author and poet. He is actually, I believe, the only writer in America to have ever won the Pulitzer Prize, both for fiction and poetry. This book, his most famous work, having won him the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. Now, All the King's Men is something of a romaniclef, I guess you could say. It is a novel heavily inspired by real life events. Those events being the governorship of Huey Long in Louisiana. So, if you're not familiar with Huey Long was a kind of a left wing populist governor in Louisiana in the early 20th century who was eventually assassinated, actually. And All the King's Men is something of a fictionalization of that figure and his tenure in office. So the story of All the King's Men, it tells of the rise and subsequent assassination of Willie Stark, who is the stand-in character for Huey Long. The book is narrated by one Jack Burden, who is the chief of staff slash political fixer for Stark, whose job seems to be mainly to dig up dirt on other people for the purposes of blackmail. Now, I'm not going to go terribly in depth into the actual plot of this book because it's rather involved and it's not always told chronologically, so it kind of makes it difficult to succinctly summarize. But the long and short of it is, it traces the arc of this character, Willie Stark, from initial idealistic reformer to eventual corrupt demagogue. And there are some romantic entanglements, there is some backstabbing, there's a whole lot of corruption and disillusionment. And there's also a lot of musings on history and the past, as well as some philosophical asides about the nature of good and evil and whether a man can actually do good by doing evil. So it's a pretty, like I said, involved work. It's got a lot going. It's pretty lengthy too. It's over 400 pages. But yeah, so that's kind of the gist of it. So let's talk about the execution of it. So the writing of this book was overall, I found it to be quite good. It is, as I said, Robert Penn Warren was something of a Southern author, and there's a lot of similarities, I think, in this book to like the works of Faulkner. It's not really stream of consciousness like Faulkner, but like some of the way that some of these lines were written is kind of the lengthy nature of some of the metaphors and similes and stuff in here. Kind of reminded me of Faulkner. It's kind of it kind of gets long-winded at times, and that was actually the main complaint that I had about this book, had to do with certain instances of the writing. But overall, the writing is quite good. Robert Penn Warren could really write. It's quite eloquent at times, and there really are some artful metaphors and similes that are constructed in this. But my problem with it is that sometimes it just goes on a little bit too long. There are times where there are like entire paragraphs that are kind of like drawing out something that probably could have been wrapped up a lot sooner. And so, it felt a little long winded at times, but overall, this is a book of consummate skill and craftsmanship, and I think that will probably be apparent to anybody who reads it, that Robert Penn Warren could write pretty well. So, overall, I have some minor complaints about the writing, but by and large, it is a very well written book. So, not too much to complain about in that way. Now, as for the characters I thought were quite well rendered, and that's really saying something because this is a book told in first person. And with first person books, you're restricted to one viewpoint. So you oftentimes may not get the same level of depth in the secondary characters as you do in the narrator. But this book, I think, did pretty well in that regard. The characters really come alive. They're very distinct, and they feel very true to life. Jack Burton is the narrator, and he is he's kind of he feels kind of weighed down by the past at times. And again, a lot of this book is dedicated to musings on the past and on history and on the weight of history. But there's also some kind of like familial issues with him. In fact, that really comes into play there towards the end. There's kind of a shocking reveal about the parentage of our narrator, which I won't spoil. But he's got some baggage, I'll say that. And then of course Willie Stark, the central character, the Huey Long character, is very memorable, and the book really rams home the degradation of this character right out the gate, because the book opens with Stark being very, very corrupt, very, very unscrupulous, and they're going to do some pretty shady stuff to try to further their own ends. But then the book, after that, flashes back to Stark's initial foray into politics and just how different he was in terms of personality between then and now, how he was so idealistic at the onset and committed to, helping the little man, helping the people of his state. But then it's contrasted with what he is when the book opens, what he has become, which is, again, very um, unscrupulous, very immoral, and low and corrupt, thoroughly corrupt. And that's kind of the whole gist of the book. That's what All the King's Men is really about. It's that politics is a dirty business. No hands stay clean in the field of politics. Everybody gets dirty, and everybody has dirt on them in some way or another. But then we also have secondary characters such as Anne Stanton and Adam Stanton, who are childhood friends of Jack Burton, the narrator. And with Anne, he has kind of a romantic entanglement, which comes into play plot wise in a major way at the end. Um, there's kind of uh, some romantic betrayals, you might say, in this. And then it has a cast of a fairly decent size, but overall, I felt that the characters were very well rendered, all things considered. I think that it really knocked it out of the park by and large in terms of the rendering of the characters in it. Now, as to the actual story of this book, I liked it. It's interesting because even though this has been called the definitive novel about American politics, it's not terribly political, honestly. It's more about the effect of politics on the personalities of the people involved in it, rather than any kind of like actual like political statement or anything like that. And that's why most of this book, even though it is about politics, it's really kind of concerned with the decay of morals and the decay of people's ethics, and the kind of the degradation of their personalities over time, and also the burden of history and the past on all these characters. I think the narrator's name, Jack Burton, is kind of a pun, if you will. But yeah, so it's an interesting story because even though it's about politics, it's also kind of not about politics as much as you might think it would be. I mean, it is, but it's kind of taking a different perspective on a different angle with this. But like I said, it's a pretty lengthy work, and overall, I feel that it made good use of its length. It's definitely kind of a slow burn affair. It builds to its crescendo quite well, I think. But maybe there were some things here and there that could have been trimmed just a little bit. But overall, I don't really have any complaints with it. I think the story was interesting. It kept me turning the pages, and um, it was thoughtful. I'll say that it was quite thoughtful, and there were some really reflective passages in here which I quite enjoyed. So yeah, to rate Robert Penn Warren's All the King's Men. I'm going to give All the King's Men an A minus. I think it is pretty much a crackerjack book. Some minor complaints, mainly with the writing and the way that it kind of draws out some things a little bit, gets a little long-winded at times, a little bit too Faulknerian at times, if you catch my drift. But overall, I think it's a fantastic book. And, is it really the definitive novel about American politics? Beats me, I won't say one way or the other, but I think it's a great novel regardless. And I think it's one that I could really recommend. So, yeah, All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren. Have you read All the King's Men? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything I've said here today about it. And if you haven't read All the King's Men, I could really recommend this. It is a very fine novel. It is a novel of great skill and craftsmanship, and one that I think has a lot going for it, a lot kind of involved in it. It's a novel that's both entertaining and engaging, but also has some things to say about certain topics. So, yeah, I think it's a worthwhile read. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.